what if you could podcast into 1,000 different worlds where it's the same year and you're the same person, but everything else is different? And what if you couldn't cast your way back home?
Hello and welcome back to Tales from the Twists, a podcast where we do normally talk about shows from our childhood. This week, we're talking about Sliders. Again, it's part 2 of Season 1, Episode 1 of Sliders in our season break from Around the Twist, the show that we normally recap along with Captain Planet.
Yes. That's what we do, yeah.
That is what we do. That is the plan.
Little, what is it, a holiday? Called the Sliders Holiday?
A Sliders Holiday. What kind of holiday is a Sliders Holiday? You slide into 1,000 different mocktails and 1,000 different hotels.
Exactly, and it consists of largely amount of pulled pork and coleslaw.
Is that a thing? Pulled pork and coleslaw in hotels?
Yeah, you don't go into hotels and they don't give you just like a bed made out of pulled pork and coleslaw?
I couldn't tell you the last time I was in a hotel, Anthony.
Oh, because you never have been in one.
I've been in hotels.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what's the difference between a hotel and a motel?
Well, class, obviously.
All right, Mr. Snobby McSnobnose.
I think the actual difference is like a motel, you can drive your car literally up to the room or something, and you stay there for a night. It's like a motor inn.
Okay.
Whereas a hotel is like you have to park your car and you come up. And I actually don't like hotels at all.
Why?
The hotel rooms, they're really expensive and they've got, like, they're shit. They don't even have a kitchenette. They've got hot water facilities and you have to order everything else from the bloody room service. Don't like it.
Classic. That's how they get you.
They do. They get you the room service.
They all get you eventually. We are talking about Sliders, Season 1, Episode 1. And where we left the Sliders, let's just get a bit of a recap. So, the Sliders, Quinn, our brilliant yet socially awkward teenager, has created a sliding device that can send him into different worlds. And accidentally, he's brought with him into another world Wade, his sexual interest, would you say? Love interest?
A bit of both.
The one who wants to bang him, but he doesn't really want to bang her, or does he?
A little bit of always conflict.
We have Professor Arturo, the sassy older man. Just so much sass coming from Arturo. Just every time he opens his mouth, it's sass.
Everything he says is quotable.
I didn't know if I'd go that far.
Almost everything he says is quotable.
Really?
Yeah, most everything he says is quotable.
Most everything he says is quotable.
What? I don't know.
Don't worry. Then we have Rembrandt as well. Rembrandt the Crying Man from the famous band that you would all know. The Spinning Tops.
Oh.
That memorable band.
The Spinning Tops. Oh, I love the Spinning Tops.
And his gimmick was that he would produce real tears when he was singing.
Because he would cry, because he's just so passionate about whatever it was he was singing.
I mentioned it last episode, but Rembrandt is a fantastic character.
He is.
Like, I cannot think of a more memorable character in TV show.
Really?
He's just a standout. He's just really just a standout.
I don't know. I think there's more memorable characters.
Who?
Eddie.
Name one.
Eddie from Frasier.
The dog.
The dog from Frasier.
The dog from Frasier is more memorable than an African-American man that cries while he's singing and is confused about being in different dimensions and calls the main character a cue ball.
Hey, if I walked up and I had a picture of Eddie the dog on Frasier's dad's chair, right, with Rembrandt Man the Crying Man, I said, which of these do you know? They'd say, oh, I think that dog was on the Frasier. And then they'll be like, there you go, Eddie. They go, who's that guy?
All you're proving there is that more people watched Frasier, not that... Well, from people that had seen both shows, which is more memorable?
No, that's not the thing. It's,
which is
more memorable? Okay, well, if you are out there and you've
obviously,
watched
if you've
both
never
shows,
seen something, it's not going to be memorable.
If you're listening now and you've watched both shows, tell us, which one is more memorable? Rembrandt the Crying Man or Eddie the dog from Frasier?
The Crying Man.
Well, for sure, you're wrong.
For sure.
For sure, you're wrong.
For sure. These Sliders, they've been to an ice world. They got stuck in this ice world. This ice tornado was coming. Quinn quickly used Slider before its time ran out. Something he was told explicitly
not to do.
Not to do by his clone from another dimension.
Evil Quinn.
Who is not an evil Quinn.
We think we
it just happens to be we settled that he was a different Quinn.
Who likes to commit adultery, therefore is evil.
They ended up... Is kissing adultery?
If you're married, it is.
Is it... I thought... Adultery is the act of carnal knowledge, right?
Yeah, but like, okay, maybe it is an adultery, but like you kiss another woman and then explain that it's not adultery to your significant other.
That's cheating.
Yeah, well, adultery is cheating. Is it? The same shit, different story.
I don't know. I'm nitpicking here.
You're nitpicking on what we used to word.
I don't know.
He is a cheater, and once a cheater is always a cheater.
I just don't know about the word adulterer for someone who has kissed somebody else.
At the same time you're married, I think that makes you an adulterer.
I think adultery is specifically talking about
all right,
the bed banging.
He's a fly boy he has no respect for the lady in his life or something. Probably makes him a bad guy.
All you b-boys and fly girls, listen to that.
Yeah.
We've left our sliders. They've come from this frozen world. They've gone into this Russian world, and Cue Ball's gone to the park where everything's a little bit Russian. You know, there's this statue of what's his face, Lenin, not the Beatle, the other guy. And the police have been called on Wade, the woman, Wade is a woman in this world, unlike in real life where Wade is a man's name. Have you ever met a woman named Wade?
Never met a woman named Wade, but that's kind of weird, I guess. I mean, I don't keep track of names like that. I'd be like, oh, that's a weird name for a girl. I mean, Peter, to me, is a weird name for a girl, but it's a thing.
It's weird, especially in TV, right?
Yeah.
These writers, they think they're so progressive. They give females male names because, we're so wacky and different. And then it just becomes confusing for everyone, doesn't it? Especially if you're reading the script. It's like, wait, who's this again? Isn't that a man? Cameron? That's a man, right?
Yeah.
Ryan?
Cameron?
That's a man.
Ryan?
Thomas?
That's definitely a man.
Who says, Anthony?
Brad.
Your binary standards of heteronormativeness?
Yeah. My standards say that, yeah.
Don't you put your judgment on my feelings.
Misgender me, you cis-het white male oppressor.
Yeah.
Or some whatever.
Take that,
patriarchy.
Anyway, Rembrandt's in this cab, and he's come up to a toll, and the taxi driver, he's asked him to give him money. And so he gives the taxi driver some money. And the cabbie's like, whoa, what's this? Pulls up a cab, pulls up at the toll, runs to the toll attendants, and it's like, shouts at them in Russian. Then all of a sudden, the cab's surrounded in all these military troops pointing their guns at Rembrandt. Mm-hmm. Oh, crying man.
You're going to be crying for reals.
But are you implying that he wasn't crying for real in his show?
I'm implying it was a different type of crying.
Yeah. But his whole gimmick was that he was real tears. He was crying for real.
Yeah, but now he'd be crying because he's going to be like... he's facing a death squad, which is probably worse. Yeah. Nothing, you can't really... there's nothing romantic about that.
Well, he's not facing a death squad yet. He's just facing men pointing their guns at him.
Well, that's also kind of scary. And a man who professionally cries a lot, I feel like he'll cry there because he's a crying man. He can get away with it. You can just let out a big wet one. You just be like, and it's like, well, it's the crying man shtick. I guess that's what he does.
Wade, Arturo, and Q are wandering around the Russian slums, and they're being watched by men in suits. This is a very different world to the one they first landed in. All of a sudden, they're in these Russian communist slums.
Yeah.
When they've come from it was just normal. Everything was fine.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, there's just, horrible stuff going on. How did they not notice this as soon as they landed?
Because it just, like, the Russian secret police are so secret, you wouldn't notice it unless you're trying
at
to hide from them.
nighttime. I think that's the moral of the story. Don't wander around Russian-occupied land in nighttime because everything turns into a horrorscape.
Exactly. Also, there's a lot of, like, positive things in the Russian country. I don't know. They've got free uni... I don't know. If Russians had invaded America and you came back within the first couple of minutes, you would not notice anything until someone opens their mouth and they start speaking Russian. And even then, they probably wouldn't even speak Russian. They'd speak English still, but it'd be Russianized English. So they'll use words like Bolshevik, proletariat's in the Russian word, but like more Marxian rhetoric as well as some pro-Russian words. But you'd still have English as a native language because everybody speaks it.
So what you're trying to tell me is that you think that Australia should be a communist nation. Is that what you're trying to tell me here? Because nothing would be different. Is that the moral of your story, Anthony? Is that what you're trying to tell the listeners?
If you want to extrapolate that far, sure. Let's just make it a communist country, as if it's not already.
That is a fair point.
It is already a communist country, and you people need to wake up. Come on, guys. Don't you know?
Wake up, sheeples.
Wake up, sheeples. The two governments are really just two puppets on the hands of a big master.
New World Order.
New World Order.
You think it's from the future? It's now. Gotta wake up and smell that lizard-controlled population.
Stop drinking iodine water, was it?
Iodine water?
What's the water?
The fluoride, yeah.
It's that blank fluoride stare.
It calcifies your
gland.
Pituitary gland. What? The pineal gland.
That's it.
Yeah, get your glands correct, Anthony.
Sorry, I didn't go to university.
Just because you're not a neurologist doesn't mean you can't correctly identify the glands of the brain. So we've got these sliders. They're wandering around in the Russian slums and they're being watched by secret Russian police. And the team has to wait for the slider device to recharge. But it can be fixed with the right tools and enough time. Because Quinn, he's good like that.
He's pretty clever.
He's pretty clever. Rembrandt has been taken to a big warehouse for interrogation. And he's saying, is the American Underground a band or is it a club? Oh, you, Rembrandt. So
Rembrandt.
The secret Russian police are hunting the secret American Underground. Is this something that you'd be involved in? If you lived in America and it was taken over by Russians, would you join the secret American Underground?
Probably.
Why?
Well, they stand for freedom and democracy, and also, it sounds like a lot of fun. Shoot some commies, overthrow the government, bring back liberty and freedom and justice for all. What could go wrong?
Everyone hates the commies. The commies are great to hate, but are they really that bad?
Yes, and no. There are, okay, so...
Let's take a more generalized stance. Let's instead look at this specific... Well, not generalized. Let's look at a more specific thing. So this episode's trying to tell us, right?
Yeah.
How bad America would be if the Russians had won the Korean War. If the communists had won the Korean War and then the domino theory had persisted and then taken over all of the US.
Yeah.
Okay? Is this a fair representation of what would have happened had those events taken place?
I think that it would have ended up with Americanized style communism. It would have been a mash of the two, just because the two cultures are very distinctly different. So, you want to take some communist countries that have still communist, I guess, and that's one. China is a good example. They're still a very collectivistic culture. They were before the communists took power. So communism and collectivism work together quite nicely. So the people of that country, maybe they'd be more open to it. America has been founded on principles of liberty, freedom, democracy. Those three core principles are things that resonate with their people so strongly that if communists tried to take that away, it would meet with lots of resistance. And so the communists could either try to destroy them, which they would probably do that, but they'd also create some sort of quasi-communist state where it's like, you still vote for your representatives. So we saw the Senate there. So there's still amount of democracy. There's some amount of freedom of speech, but you can't speak ill of the party. But everything else you can say freedom of speech of. If you don't like somebody who's a business, you post that online. You say, it's a shit business. That's what would happen, But not the government. You can't criticize the government. And was it liberty as well? You can still do a lot of things that are free, and maybe even have more freedom. So maybe some, legalization of marijuana or something. Just because. Oh, wow.
You really think a Russian communist America would allow the legalization of drugs?
Not all of them, but if you gave people some liberties in some areas, you can take them away from other areas. Because people would say, well, yeah, sure, but...
look at all this stuff they've given us.
Yeah, look at all the liberties we have here, when in reality, other crucial ones that they need to maintain power are taken away. But some general public doesn't care about that.
That's a very Australian thing, isn't it? Look at all this stuff we have.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be upset about us looking at your data, your metadata history of your internet browser or ISP, all that internet stuff, because you've got free healthcare.
Yeah, it's pretty much. Oh mate, you got free healthcare.
This government gives Australia so much. I don't think the Australian people should be complaining that we're looking at their internet data.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that Australians just don't give a shit half the time, so we don't really do anything to stop it.
I wonder, Australia has a thing where we don't really care about things, or that's the common perception, right?
Yeah.
But I'm starting to think that maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's just a population thing. Okay? So if you look at bigger countries, like America, when something happens they don't like, a lot of people arc up.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, they have an enormous population. So even if a small amount of people, the active engaging people, actually get up and do something about it, that's still, that's a small percentage, but a large number of people. Whereas in Australia, if a small number of people, large, whatever, an amount of people are upset. Let's talk about something specific. What's an issue? Any issue.
Same-sex marriage?
Okay, same-sex marriage. Somebody's upset about it. However big that percentage is, maybe 10% generous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those people, they get upset about it. They go to do something. That's not that many people because Australia only has a population of like 20 million.
Yeah. So there's not many people getting upset. I think it's actually a carryover from our I don't know what you call it, pre-connected society. In the 70s and 80s, or right up to the 70s and 80s, we were very much disconnected from everything. Like, even if you were in Brisbane, it didn't matter what happened in Sydney that much. It was like, oh yeah, because what connection did you really honestly have with Sydney? What connection did you really honestly have with Melbourne? Most average Australians were like, why do I give a shit about what's happening in Melbourne? Why do I care what's happening in Sydney? That does not affect me in one iota. So it came this attitude of, look, I don't care. Look, if I don't give a shit about you. You don't have to give a shit about what I'm doing. So it became this she'll be right attitude. But now that we've become way more connected, it's so easy to protest. It's so much easier to arc up that more people should do it because it's, implications of what happens in Sydney will affect Brisbane and other major cities.
I don't know that we are that more connected though. Like, sure, there's the internet and you hear about stuff a lot more, but there's still that geographic boundary that kind of in some way created that gap in the first place. And I don't think that's ever been truly mended, especially from how difficult it is to travel to a different part of Australia.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realise this, but it costs more to fly to Perth than sometimes it does to fly to Europe.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous, right? But
is it really?
Yeah. It can be a lot more. It can be like $5,000 for a flight to Perth.
How much are you paying to go to bloody Perth? Jesus.
Like
Christ.
$5,000.
Jesus. Where are you flying?
Well, obviously, I'm not going to Perth.
You're going on business
because I'm not going
class.
to fly to a shithole for $5,000. Like if I'm going to play,
Perth.
Yeah, I'm not going to fly to a shithole for $5,000. If I want to fly somewhere interesting,
you do know that Perth is ranked as like one of the highest valued cities in the world.
Yeah,
right?
because of all the mines.
It's not going to be valued for a long time. For a while, I can tell you that much.
What is there aside from a big hole in the ground?
Property. That's about it.
Yeah, it's a big hole in the ground, and there's a few houses, and then once the big holes are filled over, then all the houses will be too.
Oh yeah.
Why bother? Why bother going there?
Why even bother? Unless you want to beat time.
What?
I don't know. You fly with the time zone, and then it's like you're trapped in like
Superman
a time
theory.
Warp. Yeah.
So if you constantly go back across the time zones, you can go back in time? Is that what you're saying?
No, you freeze time by just flying with the time zones.
So it's constantly the time.
It's constantly 1 p.m. So you'll never be late.
But that
for
wouldn't
anything.
work because of the prime meridian. You'd eventually cross over to where you were before.
Oh, you screwed that, eh?
Yeah, you are pretty screwed.
Oh, well.
International dateline, I don't know. Stuff. Hey?
Yeah.
Science, geography.
Bloody science.
Stuff. The interrogator says to Rembrandt, who the man we're supposed to be talking about here, he says, "Who are you? The real Rembrandt died 12 years ago?" I can't read my own writing. In a Detroit uprising.
Wow. He was in a Detroit uprising. Might have been
so
heavily involved with I don't know. It's interesting that he comes from Detroit.
He's from San Francisco.
What,
unless
Rembrandt?
he just happened to be in San Francisco for that game. That's something that I haven't really considered.
He might have been because Detroit does have Detroit is Motor City, right? And is also
Detroit,
and is the home of Motown, and also has a high black population as well. I'm not saying that all black people come from Detroit, but I'm saying that if you're a Motown singer, who's apparently died in Detroit in the other universe, I'm going to go and say that you probably came from Detroit. It's probably not a bad estimate.
I think what they were hinting at was that there was some sort of large uprising thing and all the African Americans rallied together in this one specific location.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so whenever there's like a cause, you need like...
Ferguson.
Yeah, but whenever
Communist Ferguson.
Whenever you have some sort of people getting together for some sort of cause, there's two key things, maybe even more, that you need. The first is a figurehead. You need a person to personify the idea that you're going for. Like you need a leader to rally around, to promote your idea, to represent the idea in your minds and also the enemy's minds. Second thing you need is a location, like a physical location where everyone can rally and you can have that human connection of being in the same place as people who also have the same ideas as you. And that's the way that ideas and resistances, uprisings, all that kind of thing, they're, I believe, the two main things that you need. Can you think of anything else you need for an uprising?
What was the two things again, just summarized?
I literally just summarized them.
I know you did.
a person, a figurehead, and a location.
A cause, obviously. You're forgetting a cause.
Well,
I think a cause
isn't that implied?
Yeah, it should be inherent, but a cause is... But no, it's not implied, because sometimes a cause is the catalyst for change. Someone gets shot by... A particular person gets shot by the police. Good example again. Ferguson. So a black boy gets shot by the police. That is the catalyst for the riots. There was underdeveloped tension already, but it was that change. It was that one incident and how it was handled. That's what really propelled the riots.
And that catalyst in that specific instance is like a whammy, a three whammy. So you've got the catalyst, somebody was killed, somebody was shot, right? You have a person, you got the boy who was killed.
Yep.
Normally it'd be a leader, but in this case it's like somebody who's died.
Yeah.
That you can rally around that cause. And the third thing, you have location where it was killed. So these three elements come together as a lens. Boom.
Boom.
You got a riot.
You do. And you know what I'm thinking would be interesting with these Detroit riots in the alternate universe? Because the Americans have lost the Korean War and communism started spreading around the globe, now, the Korean War happened around about the 1950s, early 1950s.
Yeah, 58, they said in Sliders.
58. Now, the civil rights protests led by Martin Luther King, that was in the early 60s to mid-60s, and he died in late 60s, right? My question is, would Martin Luther King's protests have gone ahead? I don't think they would have.
I believe that was actually in Detroit, right?
No, I don't know.
I think it was actually in Detroit. I remember from Mad Men.
No, it could have been. So I'm thinking maybe they didn't go fully ahead, and Dr. King, therefore, would not have been assassinated because he was assassinated by people who were like, I don't like these, well, I guess white supremacists would kill him. I don't know if he's a white supremacist. He didn't like the black people trying to get their rights. So, bad racist man. Okay? He would still be alive. Would Dr. King have led that riot?
I think the more interesting question, at least for me anyway, is what are these people rioting about?
Yeah.
Okay? So is it the Black Rights Movement? Or is it something more directly related to the communism? Are they pro-communism? Are they anti-communism? Because in theory, right, they may even be pro-communism.
They might be, yeah.
Because of everyone is equal. The everyone is equal values.
Actually, that's a good point, because if everyone is equal, then that actually does work into what they need. It's like, yeah, I guess that if everyone is equal, it does work into what they need. It's very interesting. It's very interesting playing the alternate history idea.
I think this is probably the most interesting point of the whole episode.
Yeah.
You know, that one throwaway line, like, you died in the Detroit riots.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so there was obviously a fair amount of violence at these riots. They're probably black rights related, right? If we can pin that at the same area. But, you know, is it pro-communism and anti-communism? Like, was it just African-American people? Was it, like, white people too?
What if it was that the communists were not so much welcomed by the African-American community, but the perception was that these communists who were all for equal rights would bring equal rights to African-Americans. But by the 90s, because, it was how many years? 12 years ago, so 1980s, right? That's 30 years after the Korean War, 20 years after Civil Rights Movement. 20 years, still no change. Perhaps they were protesting the fact that these communists were supposed to bring about change, were supposed to do something for us, but we're still in this terrible location. We're still having bad stuff done to us. There's still a lot of racism as we see it. That's why we're rioting. Thoughts? Potentially?
Yeah, no, I agree. The only thing that you brought up was, I've written down 12 years.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate that is, because if you do the maths, right, the Detroit riots that we know from history, you think somewhere in the 60s?
Yes.
Late 60s, early 60s, mid 60s?
I think they were early 60s.
Okay, so that places you about somewhere in the 70s or 80s for these riots, right?
I do know that. I do know that Richard Nixon signed the Equal Rights Act in the early 70s. So that was the catalyst. That was the culmination of the entire movement. And I'm pretty sure JFK was somewhat of a supporter of the starts of the movement, which was where I think it was the integration of schools, public schools. I think President Kennedy said, this integration of schools has to happen, so they had National Guards. So it had to be in the early 60s when it started. So it was between early 60s to early 70s was this movement.
You see, the thing that's interesting about that is how old is Rembrandt? He was famous in the 70s, though, right?
Yes.
So he would have had to be in his 20s then.
Yes.
Because he wasn't a teenager.
No, he wasn't.
So, I don't know. Well, maybe this is something that we can look back upon in the future.
Well, I'm just saying that the riots didn't actually occur in the 60s in this universe. They happened in the 80s.
You think they had to be in the 80s?
I think they happened in the 80s.
Maybe they're different riots.
I think that's what I'm saying. They are different riots, but they still have similar ideas. I just thought that maybe communism didn't bring about this change within 20 years, and it was like, this is ridiculous. That's why we're rioting here.
You know what I want to see?
Yeah.
I want to see a movie or a TV show, episode, something featured around this alternate universe in the 80s when this riot happens. In the context of this Russian universe. Because I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, it would be.
This really big event for American history taking place under these significantly altered rules are going to have, far-reaching implications and repercussions. And I think that would be super interesting.
It would be.
And I think there's not enough of that, to be honest.
Not enough alternate history thing?
Alternate histories of, very specific events. I know there's a lot of alt history for, really old...
Yeah.
Medieval and Renaissance type stuff. But I don't think there's, modern history enough. Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of World War II alt history around.
Yeah.
But, modern history...
The Man in the High Castle.
Yeah, Men in the High Castle. Does 1163, 80, whatever count?
I don't know.
It's a Stephen King novel that has been turned into a TV show starring James Franco about somebody going back in time to kill JFK or something and somebody going back to stop them.
Yeah, but that does count, I reckon.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about that. We've talked about that way too long, but yes, that was very interesting. Rembrandt tells the investigator his crazy story, everything that's happened to him in the last hour and a bit of television, and he isn't believed, obviously, because he's talking about wormholes and frozen planets and a Cadillac being stuck in ice. And he doesn't understand the implications of the American dollar, which is being used in this universe as a sign of the American resistance. And the investigator says, listen, if you confess, I'm going to fight for you. And Rembrandt instantly recognizes this guy. It's Ross J. Kelly.
Yeah, the lawyer from the television ads.
Not Charlie's uncle, but a lawyer, and from his own universe, who he's seen on TV lawyering up. Being a lawyer man.
Yeah.
He had that ad where he said, oh,
you got
listen,
hit with the head with
I'm
an
a lawyer.
anvil
Yeah, this other guy got hit on the head with an anvil and he's like, Ross J. Kelly got me $1,000 or something. I think it was actually $1 million. But Rembrandt does have not the best memory.
So you better call Saul, basically. Have you seen that show?
No, I haven't.
It's really good.
Well, we've discussed this because
I know, but
I'm not the biggest fan of Breaking Bad.
Every time I bring this up, it's more like, have you seen it? No, I haven't. It's a pretty good show. Maybe you should go watch it. It's not like I'm bringing it up for fun. It's like, maybe you should watch it.
You are bringing it up for fun. That's the reason you're bringing it up.
Yeah, I am. I'm okay.
Because it's fun for you to talk about. You are bringing it up for fun.
All right, I am bringing it up for fun, but I'm thinking that you could have more fun if you watched it.
I don't think so. Is it better than Breaking Bad?
No.
Then I'm not going to watch it because I didn't even think Breaking Bad was that good.
That's fine. All right, you just stick to your bad television.
Oh, shots fired.
Shots fired.
And the military boss comes over and he asks to speak to the investigator. And he says, we think Rembrandt is a master spy. He knows your real profession. He knows your civilian profession. He must have some serious info on us. He's got to be tried and disposed of as quickly as possible. And so they decide to send Rembrandt to the People's Court. This is a joke that I didn't get that the first time I watched this. I watched this for the first time when I was about 18.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't get it for a number of reasons. The first one was that in a communist nation, they like to call everything the people's.
Yeah.
Because we are the people. A communist society is
People's
all about...
Liberation Army.
Yeah, people owning everything.
Yeah.
Okay? Because that's the idea of communism. Everybody has ownership over everything.
Yeah. It's your theory. This is your theory again, actually, in place of if you have to describe something as something, then it isn't that thing. So... The People's Liberation Army is anything but owned by the people.
Oh, yeah.
The Democratic Republic of such and such is Democratic People's Republic of Korea is anything but democratic or the People's Republic.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. But that's one point, right? Calling everything the People's whatever. The other point was there's a TV show in America called The People's Court.
Yeah.
Which neither of these things I had knowledge of at the age of 18.
Very clever. I'll say this joke is pretty clever.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about Sliders. There's a lot of subtlety in the writing. There's some really nice subtlety, and it's something that we're not especially used to primarily podcasting about children's TV shows. I have to say, especially, I'm looking at you, Captain Planet. The subtlety over there is not always subtle.
So the subtlety in Captain Planet is being hit in the face with like an environmental message.
But it's a very different audience. And I think the guys that were working on Sliders had some pretty good skills.
Yes.
Like to be able to make a TV show about traveling to different dimensions, to make that primarily focused around societal issues stemming from alternate history ramifications.
Yes.
Like that's an achievement. To be able to get that onto national television, that's a big achievement, especially on a television station like Fox.
Yeah.
I know they did get sabotaged a little bit later on and have episodes about dinosaurs chasing them around. But, you know, to have episodes like this, have a pilot episode of this TV show, a science fiction TV show, be about what if America was run by Russians. That's crazy.
I think this is great, but I can also understand why Fox wanted to change it, because this has its great show, but I can see the limited appeal in this, at least in the 90s. Just, someone being chased by a dinosaur, yeah, okay, that probably will get ratings. Contemplating what communism would have been like if enacted in America probably would be a nice little thinking and scratch your head, but not a big draw for the audience as a whole.
To be fair, the social commentary of this episode is not enormous, right? It's fairly one-sided, and it doesn't have a lot of depth. Like, it's like, oh, Russians, it would be terrible.
They should have showed some of the benefits of communism, because it was just pretty much communist or Russian communism is bad, just bad. Oh, like we find out as we see when we cut back to Wade, Quinn, and Arturo.
Yes.
After this, we see them in the slums, and we see a woman being pulled off the streets by the Russian secret police, or I guess you call them the American secret police in this one. And they also see the Russian, the people's secret police, let's call them secret police, the secret police grabbing a couple of people, putting them against a wall, and then opening fire in a public execution. Very much saying, hey, remember communism? Remember how it's terrible? Yeah, well, here's a reminder. It pulls people off the streets and has public executions. What it should have had is things like bread lines, where you actually had literally people getting food for free. Maybe some people at university or free healthcare, some of the things that, you know, there are benefits in a communist society. You know, so I can understand there's a good appeal of it, and maybe some more compassionate, comrade-esque style things, but you could have kept the secret police there. That's the thing that would drive home the point that, look, they have benefits in a communist society, don't get me wrong, but do you really want a secret police? Do you really want people being pulled off the street? Because this is what happens in a communist society. Not all of them, but many of them that has happened.
There's two things I briefly want to talk about here. The first is that scene where people getting pulled off the street and shot is very confronting.
Oh, yeah.
Like, even as a very media literate person in the year 2016, I've watched a lot of television, I've watched a lot of movies, I know what to expect from things. But seeing that scene just out of nowhere, just these people get pushed up against the wall and then shot in the head, was just, like, so unexpected. I was very close to being thrown. I was like, whoa, like, I don't remember that. Like, that's pretty full on.
Yeah.
And which leads me kind of into the second point that I wanted to make. You said something about people back in the 90s not being so interested in intellectual issues.
Yes.
I actually want to slightly disagree with you. I think people in this year and time are less interested in actually thinking about hard intellectual issues than they were in the 90s. People are confronted with a lot of stuff, mostly social issues, right? And that kind of like blocks their brain to thinking about intellectual issues.
Yes.
So when they're in their relaxed time, they're not so interested in exercising the intellectual part of their brain because they're so bombarded by the emotional part of their brain that they just want to watch something garbage like The Block.
Yeah.
Or My Kitchen Rules or something. They're not interested. I would say now there is far more garbage on TV than there was in the 90s. Like, we have entire free-to-air channels of nonsense.
We do.
SBS2 is the desperate single-person channel.
Yeah,
it's got, like, they regularly show pictures of people's dogs.
Really?
Yeah, people send in pictures of their dogs and their cats, and they show them.
That's cool, I guess. I don't know. That's quality entertainment right there.
Like, I was watching it one day, and I was like, oh my goodness. It was like, some weird show followed by If You Are the One, the Asian dating show we've talked about before. Yeah. And then it's like, it's time for people's dogs. And it's like, if you want your dog on TV, you send it in. It's just like people holding their dog. And it's like, oh my goodness. Like, how many single people watch this channel?
Exactly. Well, I think that the counter to that is you see a lot of rise in online videos of, I guess, really, really, like or a podcast where we go over the top analysis of pop culture or something along those lines, something similar, video games, game theory or whatever it is. My problem with those type of things isn't necessarily that they do it, it's that I think it appeals to people who are growing up in either they're going to uni or they're growing up in the uni culture where it's like you need to go to uni, so you study really hard and you have intellectual pursuits. It's considered it's considered good. You're not applying then learning about science. You're not learning about whatever it is your field of study is. You end up learning about why Link could actually have a hook shot, or you couldn't have a hook shot because it tears off his arm because game theory bloody videos. Yeah.
See, I would say that this links into what we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
With there's not an increased audience for it, but because of the interconnectivity provided by the internet,
yes,
that niche audience now has a collective outlet for that on the internet. So there's not more people that want that stuff. It's just there's one place on the internet where they can get it.
Yeah.
So there's not this audience for that's not grown. It's just these people didn't have an outlet for that before because there wasn't that interconnectivity. Oh man, I'm stumbling today. But now that there is on the internet, you can get that, and all these people pool in these places, and that's where that audience comes from.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are very behind on covering this episode, but I think it's okay. Arturo says, "Does anybody want a kielbasa? My stomach has no political preferences." Oh, Arturo.
Arturo, you...
And so he rolls over to this vendor and gives him an American dollar. And just as you think that Arturo is about to be shot in the head by a kill squad, the vendor gives Arturo a different dollar in return. Was it the Russian dollar he gives him?
Yeah, he gives him a red Russian dollar.
And it turns out that the phone company is after Wade, the People's Phone Company. And so the vendor grabs the sliders and takes them into an alleyway to hide them because he's like, oh, they're they're American resistance because they had an American dollar. And he recognizes Wade as the commander of the American resistance.
Yes.
Or at least the West Coast edition.
So it turns out in this universe, Wade is a political and military commander.
What do you think about this? Because I was thinking about this as I was on the drive over here this morning.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes up a little bit later is that Arturo says, oh, in every world, I'm a leader of men. It's like, oh, yeah, all right, Arturo. But it makes me think, like, even if there's a different universe, even under different circumstances, how radically would a person's individual character change? And we talked about this a little bit last week with Evil Quinn nonsense, but
scientific fact,
specifically Wade, someone who's fairly meek-mannered. Like, she's got a little bit of a go about her, but from going to this person that's working in an electronics store to being a leader of, like, a large contingent of paramilitary soldiers.
Yes.
That's a big change. And would the change in universe have been enough to provide that?
I think it would have.
You think that just that change provided such a radical change? We're not talking about like a little bit of change here. Like, she wasn't in any sort of leadership role in the main universe, but in this other one, she's leading like hundreds of like big dudes.
Yeah. Well, greatness, sometimes gets thrust upon you. And also, I don't think she'd be working in an electronics store in that universe because the Japanese wouldn't have they wouldn't have pioneered and pushed a whole bunch of electronics, I guess. Because, obviously, communism. There weren't a lot of, Sony's and, what's the other company? Samsung's technology behind the Iron Curtain. Samsung's Korean, isn't it? Whatever. So, there wouldn't be that much electronics store that you had in America, potentially.
Yeah.
So, she wouldn't work there, but that's neither here nor there. I think it's just greatness is thrust upon you, and she just reacted to the situation.
See,
we don't know, and I think we don't know enough about Wade's character yet to know if she has the chutzpah or whatever it is. Chutzpah. Mazel tov. L'chaim. Whatever that means.
Yeah, I don't know.
Goyim.
I don't speak Yiddish.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a Yiddish person.
Yeah, neither am I. So we don't know what her character would be like under those situations. Maybe if later on in the season we could come back to this and say, well, what do you think? Would she actually have developed those characteristics based on what we've seen of her? Based on her intrinsic ideas? If she's a strong-willed character, maybe she would be able to lead.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because I don't want to dwell too much longer on this, but there is that intellectual, philosophical idea of nature versus nurture.
Yes.
And, what you're arguing again is that nurture is more powerful than nature. And I'm not sold.
You're not sold?
I think that it does have a big part to play.
Yes.
But I don't know how radical that change is. Like, is it enough to change a mild-mannered person into a resistance leader? I don't know.
I think it can. Look, PTSD. Right?
You got to believe, man.
No, PTSD, right?
Okay.
Because even then, right, so PTSD can completely change people's personalities, and that's because the trauma literally has an effect on the brain. It changes the way that the brain interprets pain and deals with situations. And if that can occur to people who suffered great traumatic stress, it stands to reason that other events in their life could change their brain's makeup. It may not be likely to do so. It might be like you are more likely to do this or go a certain path. But if circumstances arise that force a change, then yes, I believe stimulus can then just change what your predetermined genetics were.
Okay, that's a fair point, and something to think about if we do Sliders as a full season. The phone company is after Wade, and so they're hiding in this alley, and this vendor guy, he's going to take them to the resistance base. And they walk in there, there's guns and equipment everywhere, and loads of soldiers. And a big African-American guy kisses Wade, and Arturo and Quinn are both pretty jealous.
Yeah.
And the big guy says, "Welcome to the revolution." Except not in a weird French accent at all.
Welcome to la revolution.
Revolution.
Yes, my brother.
Welcome, my dear Wade. Welcome. And we cut to Quinn and Arturo waking up chained to a wall. And Quinn's sad because he's just realised his mum has lost him as well as his dad. And he thinks that she won't be able to fare well. And Arturo says, "Don't worry, she'll see you soon enough. We'll get back there. Don't worry, man. It's all good." They're released and taken to Wilkins, who is the big guy, Wade's lover in this universe. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Did you sleep well?" And Arturo says, "I always sleep well with my arms chained up, you blithering idiot." Oh, Arturo.
Oh.
So much sass.
So much quip.
The Resistance now believe the Sliders because Wade, from the Russian world, is in jail in a university which is run by Arturo. So they're like, "Oh, well, we definitely know because, we know where Wade is, blah, 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 blah." Mm-hmm. And Arturo says, "Well, I'm always a leader of men, no matter what the world." And it's like, all right, Arturo, we know you got big tickets on yourself, but no need to be a dickhead, please.
Yeah, mate. Pull your head in.
And Quinn says quickly to Wilkins, he says, "How did you know that Wade was different?" And Wilkins says, "Wade is my commanding officer and lover. They may look identical, but I can tell the difference." Ooh. What is going on here, Wilkins? What have you been doing?
Yeah, little hide the sausage.
What?
That's what it's called, right?
Hide the sausage?
Hide the sausage.
What's... What?
Exploring the Forbidden Garden.
Nightcrawlers. The rebellion is apparently losing, and it's going to be the death of liberty. Mm-hmm. And Quinn says to Wade, "What does he mean? What's happened? What does he mean he knows that you're different? He can tell the difference." And Wade says, "We're buds, right? What do you care?" It's like, yeah, she does have a fair point. You did say that it would be like incest to kiss her.
Maybe he's just he doesn't really understand the whole thing about, being in love and stuff. Maybe he doesn't understand emotions. Yeah,
why doesn't he understand emotions, Anthony? What have you got to say?
I don't need to say anything.
That dirty, great big smirk you got on your face begs to differ.
Yeah, well, I'll begging my differing all over here. Yeah, showed you, didn't I?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, put you in your place.
The Resistance explain that the US lost the Korean War and started the domino theory, and the US fell to communism. The Stargate SG-1 man is here, listening to hip-hop, and Wade joins him and watches a hip-hop video about some guys, and they're rapping about comrades. They're going, "Comrades, comrades, everyone loves a comrade." And this is weird for multiple reasons. One, the SG-1 gate controller is watching hip-hop. And two, they're Russian rappers, which I think Wade has a problem with.
Yeah.
Yeah, step off, Wade. People can rap about whatever they want.
Yeah, at least they're not rapping about their gold chains and big booty bitches.
What's wrong with that, Anthony? Do you have something wrong with hip-hop culture?
Yeah.
Are you a culturist?
I'm a culturist. Yeah. I don't like hip-hop culture.
Why not?
It's all the same shit, isn't it? Or at least it was for a long time. It was all about, hey, look what I can buy with all my money, and look at all these big booty bitches. And it's like, well, I'm looking at them. You don't need to tell me all about the big booty bitches and how they can wiggle their bottoms. And it's like, well, I imagine if they have bums, they can wiggle them. What is this? You know, tell me about how you grew up on the streets, or how difficult it was to get through, and or how difficult life is. No, it's about, I can spend all my cash on brand name things, and then I can get all these big booty bitches to hang out at my club.
Have you seen that Wu-Tang video where they're all wearing their brand gear?
That's great. That's
their
great
Wu-Tang
one.
stuff.
It's basically a promotion for their Wu-Tang clothing line. Yeah,
pretty good. The gate man switches the channel to the People's Court, and it's Rembrandt versus the taxi driver. And Rembrandt's defense is that he's from another world, so he doesn't have to follow the rules here, which is a fairly good defense. I think that would hold up in any court.
And it holds up in European courts.
Oh! And the judge says, is it true that you described the defendant as a treacherous, traitorous terrorist? And the taxi driver says, yes, I did do that. And Rembrandt tries to explain, but the sassy judge sentences him to 15 years in an Alaskan gulag with no parole. For treason. And Rembrandt says, don't you mean $15? And it's like, oh, Rembrandt. Oh, you sweet innocent soul.
You don't know what a gulag is.
I hope you shed a tear in that gulag.
There'll be many tears shed tonight.
It's the exit interview of People's Court, and the guy says, how do you feel? And Rembrandt says, how do you think I feel, fool? I'm never watching this show again. Small claims my ass. Back to the Resistance, and Commander Wade and Rembrandt somewhere in the same facility. They're going to be there for one day before the commander is going to Moscow for public execution. So they plan to dress up Arturo as the prison warden and head out on a raid. And Arturo, he's been dressed up. He's wearing his Russian leader clothes, and he says, I could be home drinking sake and watching Jeopardy. And Quinn says, it's Tournament of Champions. I miss it too.
Which channel was Jeopardy on?
I don't know, the American channel. MSNBC, I don't know, one of the ABC, the other American channels.
It's like, why would they specifically just be like, oh yeah, it's Tournament of Champions on Jeopardy this week? Wink, 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 wink. Jeopardy's a pretty good show, guys. Jeopardy's a pretty good show. You know what else is a great show? People's Court. And then they'll go, oh yeah, People's Court was a pretty good show. I guess we'll maybe go watch People's Court, maybe? I don't know. Judge Judy, in a parallel universe, will be Judge Judy, except in this one she's like super nice.
See, we're running out of time, so I don't want to get too hung up on this, but one thing I wanted to check in on is meta-humor, right?
Yes.
It's becoming prevalent to the point where people will make shows and movies that consist of nothing else. The later seasons of Community, I'm looking at you.
Yes.
Like, there's no actual substance to the joke. It's just a reference that's supposed to be funny.
Yep.
There's no joke there. It's just a reference. Okay? And a lot of the humor in Deadpool is like that too.
To me, it's like when writers write shows about being writers.
Yeah.
Or about making films. Sometimes it's okay. But a lot of times the joke is just, oh, look, these are film terms. Or, oh, isn't it funny being in the film industry? And it's like, no, because most of the people watching this show have no idea what you're talking about. You're talking out of your ass.
I was watching this podcast yesterday.
You're watching it?
Oh, it was a video podcast thing. And the guy was talking about Marvel Heroes game.
Yeah.
And Deadpool's Ultimate is a meta reference joke, and it's server lag or something, and everything slows down. And he said, "Oh yeah, Deadpool's Ultimate is even server lag." And this one girl on the podcast was like, "Ah, it's so funny." It was like, it's not funny.
It's not funny at all.
It's literally just a reference.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really even a joke. People are just dumb, I think. I'm coming to the conclusion.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, look at me. I'm so nerdy. I get all these incredible references. And it's like, no, you're not. Just because you get the reference doesn't mean you're smart.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, I think also it's like, look, they made a reference and I got that one. It reminds me of old people. You know, when old people like make the parody of old people in TV shows, I guess, is when they make joke references that nobody's ever heard of. Looking at Monty Burns doing that. Except for us, it's like they run and reference everything under the sun that existed in the last 20 years. And it's like, I get it. Are we creating anything new? That's a good question. I don't want to dwell too long on it, but it's like, because we're referencing so many things, are we in the end actually creating anything new of substance?
That's my point, right? There's a difference between making a reference and making a joke, and we're sometimes guilty of that. Okay?
Yeah,
not always. I think we do a pretty good job of tying our references into jokes, but if you just reference something, that's not a joke on its own. If you make a joke that includes a reference, then that's funny. So if you just say, oh, you put that together so fast you're like MacGyver, that's not a joke, that's a reference.
Yes.
If you make it funny, if you give it a punchline, if you give it a start of a joke, then it's a joke.
Or you could, I don't mind having a reference though that can be good, like you use it as a noun, or is it a noun, is it a verb? You MacGyvered the shit out of that.
But that's not a joke, that's a reference.
It is.
Which is not a joke, and shouldn't be funny. I don't know. It just gets my goat. It gets my goat, Anthony.
Takes your goat away, does it?
Yeah.
Takes it to the bloody store. It's, you know.
My grass is getting long, man. I need that goat to be able to chew it down.
Yeah, well, now it's at a butcher.
Goat meat for everyone. I've lost where we're up to. Wilkins gives Cue Ball, he gives him a gun, and he says, use this gun. And Quinn looks at him and says, okay.
And then Quinn, like, points it, so looks down at, like, the barrel. It's like, what happens if I pull this trigger? And that's the end of the episode.
That's the end of Sliders.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you all next week. Back to Captain Planet. If they fail, if the resistance fails, the West Coast Uprising will fall forever. There will be no more uprising. They're giving it everything they've got on this one raid, which, you know, is not really a good idea. If you're risking your entire operation on one leader, right? Because you're not really attached to getting Rembrandt back. You just want Wade. She must be of some severe strategic importance to be able to risk everything on this one raid. The resistance, they arrive at the jail, this big convoy of guys with guns, and Arturo's sassy to the guard, and he's pretending that it's an attack readiness test, and every time he makes a mistake, he's like, ho 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 ho, and everyone laughs because they're all pretending it's a joke. And then the guard scans Arturo's palm and then lets him in, and Arturo says, oh, just remember to ignore all the alarms and sirens, because, you know, we're not actually attacking. This is just a test, remember? And so the guard immediately rings the Russian Arturo, and this is going to get bad.
Yes, and it turns out that the Russian Arturo is at home in his bed.
Rembrandt's in jail with terrible food and is rescued by Wade and loads of resistance. And he links up back with Arturo and Quinn, and Wade rushes off to go and find herself. And the guard, he's rung the real Arturo, and they set off the alarm. And there's shooting everywhere. And Quinn pistol whips a guy as they're running away, and they're shooting everywhere, and there's explosions, and people are ducking and running. Action. This is where Fox got their jollies.
Absolutely.
You know, they got their socks off this. They're like, oh, people are going to love this.
People are going to love this action. Action.
Arturo, Cue Ball, Wade and Rembrandt, they meet up in a truck and they escape the prison, and Wilkins feels he needs to shoot the guardhouse with a grenade launcher, because that's definitely a strategic important point to blow up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Wade's been shot, and they stop the trucks, and the resistance doctor rushes out and rushes in to help Wade. But it turns out it was the Russian Wade that was shot. The real Wade is okay, or at least our version of Wade. And Quinn and Wade, they snuggle.
Well, Quinn's trying to stop Wade from seeing her own dead body, which, I mean, sure, it's probably not a bad idea, because that's probably going to at best, it's going to freak you out. At worst, it's going to be like some sort of weird, two universes touching each other, and then singularity explosion they make up in sci-fi.
It's like that episode of Rick and Morty when he buries himself in the backyard.
Yeah, it is exactly like that. Yeah.
Like that's probably my favorite moment in Rick and Morty. Yeah. And it's so sad, and he's burying his body, and that music plays, and everyone's like talking to him, and he's just like glassy eyed, like staring ahead, because he's like forever traumatized that he's seen himself die and had to bury his own body and his granddad's body in the backyard. Like, that's some horrific shit. Back at the base, everyone's evacuating. They're ready to go, except for Rembrandt and a few other key personnel, because they don't have time to evacuate. They've got time to sing Amazing Grace at Wade's funeral, and Rembrandt, he's pretty good.
Oh, yes, I wrote that down, that he's actually not bad, you know. Let's see. Yeah, I wrote down, I really love it. And the revolution lives on, I think I wrote in my notes.
Revolution.
Yeah.
Quinn and Arturo, they do some calcs, and they work out how to fix the slider device. And they're going to slide back to the park, from the park, to be able to maximize the chance of getting home. Because they think if they go from the same point, according to Arturo's calculations, they'll be able to get to the same place they left.
Yes.
And this is interesting. This kind of backs up your point, because they don't have a calculator. They don't have access to the calculator. And you're saying that all that technology would have come from the Japanese.
Yes.
So them not having access to that kind of backs up your point that you made, which is good on your behalf and Slider's behalf as well.
Yeah, good on us.
Good idea.
Good on me and good on the writers. Well done.
Good
Pat
on
yourself
you.
in the back, writers.
Pat. That's subtlety in motion. And the Resistance apparently has hope again, because this was a big strategic win for them. I'm not sure why. Back on the street, the Sliders are going to the park, and the police ask for papers. And Wade says, "We didn't have time for this." She walks up and kicks him in the nuts, and the Sliders run for the park. So here's, that's kind of your argument coming up again. So Wade, having been in this fairly traumatic situation, is now balled up a little bit.
But I think maybe she had that originally, but she never had a means to exercise it. It was never a critical point where I was just it's okay for me to do this. Whereas before, she's had all these social constructions that were just I can't be this ballsy kind of girl because it's not fitting with my environment.
The Sliders, they get back to the park, and they slide. Wait. The Sliders, they run for the park. They get there back in time. The slider activates, and there's heaps of police running to catch them. I don't know why they're not shooting or anything, but they slide back, and they land in a park. And there's an Abe Lincoln statue, and a homeless man is still homeless. He's sleeping, so Quinn gives him some Russian dollars to comfort his dreams, and they go and get a taxi. Rembrandt freaks out because it's the same taxi driver, and the taxi driver says, "Oh, yes, I do recognize you. You're from the Spinning Tops. Ha 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 ha. I listen to all your records. I sell them on black market for many, many rubles." The Sliders relax, because this is obviously a good place to be. I thought that would have sent off alarm bells, mentioning a black market.
Why?
Do they have the black market in America, or was he referencing Russia? What?
He was probably referencing Russia, or he's referencing he can sell it to overseas. There would be a black market for
records.
In Russia there was a huge black market in American music.
They're back at Quinn's house, and Quinn decides to do the classic. What?
You missed a great scene. They pull up at Quinn's house with the taxi, and Arturo says to Rembrandt to pay the man like a boss.
What?
Do you remember that scene?
Which scene?
Alright, so they're...
you don't get real disappointed with me.
So it's a great scene. Basically they pull up to Quinn's house.
Yes.
In the taxi, and then Arturo gets out of the taxi, so does Quinn and Wade, and Arturo says to Rembrandt as he's leaving, "Pay the good man, please." He basically instructs Rembrandt to pay the man, and just walks off, and it's oh man, I love you, Arturo, so much. Something
I did not get. Quinn goes to check the gate with a classic gate test, because as we know, if the gate squeaks, they're home. He checks it, it squeaks. Are they home? I think not, because this is only the first episode, and if they're home, then what are we going to do for the rest of the season? They go inside. Mum's happy to see him. She invites everyone for dinner. They're having a great time. Arturo suggests destroying the sliding device, and they discuss the risks of having the sliding device and going to other worlds. There could be places with no war, but there could also be places with super cancer.
There could be places made of lava.
They toast their wine because they're having a great day. Then a man enters, and Quinn says, "Hello, Dad," and then drops his wine because, as we know, his dad is dead. The credits begin to roll, and that's the end of episode 1 of season 1 of Sliders. And as the credits roll, we see an amazing scene as Rembrandt singing a song called "Cry Like a Man" as he performs real tears. Touching, really. Touching.
It's a beautiful scene.
It's wonderful. And that is, in fact, the end of the episode.
It is.
Would you like to talk about what you felt about the episode?
I thought that the episode was very good. It's a breath of fresh air. It was a breath of fresh air when I was younger as well. It's when you got something that's delicious and beautiful and you store it away. It's like scotch. Except I don't like scotch.
Why not?
Because it makes me feel weird. You get the scotch shivers.
Scotch belly?
No, you get scotch shivers. I drink it and you're and you get shivers all down your bloody... Nah, don't like it.
Anyway, this episode is like scotch.
Like scotch. Stored in a nice wood oak barrel or however you store it. It was tasted good when it was made, This was 20-year-old scotch. You're like, "Ooh, this is a nice drop." but then it's 40 years old and it tastes just as good. It hasn't gone off. It hasn't.
It gets better, in fact.
It does kind of get better. Especially comparing to the other crap that's existed in the last 15 years. I'm looking at you, Big Bang Theory. You should be ashamed of yourself.
How are you linking Big Bang Theory to Scott? Oh, wait, you're linking Big Bang Theory to Slide. It's okay, don't worry.
Yeah.
Yep, alright. Yeah, okay, I get yeah, don't worry. Yes, you're saying.
I'm saying it's well and it's good and I really enjoyed it. It was a great pilot. And I'm giving it 8 out of 10. What are we giving this, rating this thing?
Whatever you want to rate it.
8 out of 10 slides. No.
Russian rubles.
8 out of 10 pork. Yeah, 8 out of 10. Yeah, 8 out of 10 rubles.
8 out of 10 rubles.
8 out of 10 rubles is good.
Okay. I feel similarly to Anthony. I thought it was great. The second part's a lot better than the first part, let's be honest. That alternate history stuff does wonders. Very interesting sort of show, especially this show, Sliders. I very much enjoyed it. 8 out of 10.
Oh.
American communist dollars.
Oh, that's pretty good. But it's very good. 8 out of 10. That's a lovely benchmark for a pilot episode too. Because you never use your best idea on a pilot.
No. Pilots are interesting because you have to try and hook somebody in. But a lot of the times pilots are radically different to the rest of the show because they're trying to introduce a lot of ideas. So pilots are actually very hard to pull off.
And your budget as well. You don't have much of a budget compared to the other ones. And so you can't do all the things that you kind of want to do.
Well, we can talk about how pilots work a bit later, but on another episode maybe. But generally in America, a pilot will get commissioned before a TV show gets commissioned. So they give them a certain amount of money to be able to basically proof of concept first episode that can be later used as part of the TV show. Sometimes not. Sometimes they reshoot it if they change cast, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But they'll shoot this pilot as a proof of concept before the network commits a whole bunch more money for the rest of the season. Or at least the first half of the season before they order the second half. That's generally how it works. You go, commission the pilot. If it's good, commission first half of the season. If it's good, commission the second half of the season.
Yep.
And by good, I mean ratings.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, that is everything that we have time for. Would you like to tell people out there how they can find out more about our podcast?
You can find out more about our podcast by subscribing to us on iTunes at Tales from the Twists. You can give us a rating there and a review. That would be really great. You can also find us on Facebook at Tales from the Twists, on YouTube at Tales from the Twists, Twitter, TFT Twists, Instagram, Tales from the Twists, and as always, you can find our website. It's got all our episodes on there at talesfromthetwists.wordpress.com. And lastly, if you really like the show and you like to do sort of like pontifications or philosophies, consider joining Chicken Twisties on Facebook. It's a cool community full of cool people who like to talk about, well, the shows that you're listening to right now, obviously. We'd love to get more people in there so we get more conversations happening. It's great people in that group. So there's a link to all the stuff in this episode. So you just got to find that. It should be HTML links. And if you need to send us a message for any reason whatsoever, just to say hey, or if you found something cool you want us to throw up on Tales from Twist Facebook, or if you just want to say, I don't like you guys, well, alright, you can send us an email at talesfromthetwist@gmail.com or send us a Facebook message to our Facebook page, Tales from the Twist.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. So, thanks very much for listening to this episode. Hope you liked it. If you want to hear more Sliders, please let us know. We don't exist in a vacuum. We do exist in somewhere that is not a vacuum. So, if you want more Sliders, tell us and we'll try and find a way to make that work.
Yes.
We normally do Captain Planet and Around the Twist. So, maybe when Around the Twist finishes, we might consider something else to pick up.
Maybe
because we've only got one season left.
Maybe we'll pick up 2 shows. And we could have 3 shows we do.
Yeah, because that's not terrible at all.
Why would that not be terrible?
We can talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll think about it, eh? We'll think about it.
My name is Joe Lewis.
And I'm Anthony Bull.
You've been listening to Tales from the Twists, a podcast where we recap your childhood. Thank you very much for listening. Stay twisty.